Larrivee. Welcome to the Luth Group, the inaugural.
Nice to be here.
So your family has a long history of guitar making in Canada, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now in California?
Yeah, we build only here in California right now. Someday maybe in Canada again. But we moved here 10 days before 9/11. Just an absolute terrible time to move. But yeah, we've been here now 23 years, just about.
So how come Larrivee's moved like the whole thing from Canada to America?
I mean, it's a long story, and I'll try to sum it up. And I'm only one side of the story. There is, there's always two sides to every story. But basically, we became really large in the late 1990s. We were making 70 guitars a day,
Wow.
and at that time, and we were supplying Guitar Center huge amounts of guitars. And you have to remember, this is 1999, 2000, and wages were pretty high. Canada's has good socialist policies. You have medical, we had dental, 401k, we had all these things, and the average wage was, this is 25 years ago, average wage was $15 to $20 an hour. But we started running a second shift, and one day a union showed up outside our back door and promised our employees another, $5 or $10 an hour. So all you gotta do is sign on the bottom line. And so the union, it was a very aggressive union. It was the Canadian Auto Workers Union, which auto workers, I don't know what that has to do with guitars, but they're used to dealing with companies that have thousands and thousands of people, and not a small family business with 100 employees, and where the executives work on the floor, right? My dad is a guitar maker, my brother's a guitar maker, my mom's an inlay specialist, and I'm a guitar maker. That doesn't work with union stuff. And so as the union came in, they wanted to what's the best way to put this, they wanted to take over the business. The union wanted to be in charge of Larrivee Guitars, and they did it through health and safety, and so, prior to this point, we had been in business 30 something years at this point, and we had 2, maybe 3 workers' compensation claims. And in the following 3-month period, we had, it was some ridiculous number, like 125 workers' compensation claims. And so, all soft tissue stuff, stuff from using orbitals. And, at this point, you have to treat them all seriously. And you have to investigate each one. And, we had a medical room, and people would have to go in ice. And, it was just a constant train in and out as you try to take it seriously. But we get to the union negotiating table, and they sit us across from the big union negotiator. Now, this is the guy who deals with Ford, GM, Toyota, these massive corporations that are worth billions of dollars. And they sit across from us at the table, and they look my mom in the eye, and the guy looked my mom in the eye and said, "I hear you have a problem with health and safety. Give us what we want, and we'll make it go away." And
Wow.
and word for word. And at that night, we had a family meeting, and they said, we all sat down together over dinner, and we said, look, they're going to shut us down. They're going to put us out of business. Everything we worked for will not be here anymore. And so at that point, my dad had always wanted to live in the United States. We said, like, we got to open up another factory. We got to have redundancy. We got to protect ourselves. So we we went to we started looking at other places. We were like, okay, well, we could go to Alberta, something like that, and that was automatic union certification if you go there. And then we said, okay, well, we could go across the border into Washington State, and that was okay. And then and then we said, well, why don't we look at California? And so we did the NAMM show every year. We would drive trucks down full of guitars, and so we're like, well, why don't we do California? And so we ended up here just outside of LA, and so we opened a factory here. We didn't close the other one. We kept that other factory open for 12 more years until the economy fell apart after 2008. But after we left, when we left, the union ultimately signed their contract with us. We opened the books to them and showed them, like, this is what we make, this is who we are. They had promised the employees $5 to $10 an hour more per hour. They ultimately got 25 to 50 cents more per hour, and now had to pay union dues, right? And I don't want my story to sound like I'm anti-union. I'm not. I think unions have a time and a place. I think when dealing with the government, that's great. You should have that. Very, very large corporations, but it's a very difficult thing to do in an artistic industry like our own, where we're creating works of art. It's not conducive to that environment. So we ended up here, and then after they signed their contract, we were gone. My whole family was gone except for my brother. We the employees got together and they said, what the hell have we done? And our employees went and decertified their own union. They're the only business that had ever successfully kicked the union out. United Auto Workers had never had that happen before. And it just wasn't right for them anymore. So, I mean, that's the long version of how we ended up here. And I like it. My wife she's, it's grown on her. It's our home. It's where our kids were born and raised. But, she misses her family a lot. And, we miss, there's lots of things we miss about Canada, but, this is a great place.
So you had 100-something employees in Canada, and this is your second location now, right, in California?
Yeah. So at the time we were very large. Like I said, we were making about 72 guitars a day in that one factory. And then when we moved, we split it. So this factory here was making, I'd say about 16 a day. And following that, the shop in Canada ended up making around 48 a day. And, and then, various things happened. There was the tech crash in the, early 2000s, 9/11, the tech crash, then 2008. And in that time, we had a falling out with Guitar Center, and basically, they threatened us, and, you give us a discount or we're going to pull your line. And we said, pull our line. We don't care. It's a life lesson my father taught me very early. It stuck with me. It's a cheesy saying. I love cheesy sayings, but he said, never let anybody put a gun to your head, no matter what the cost is. If they do it once, they're going to do it again. And so, we lived by that. And we pulled our line from Guitar Center, and we shrunk a lot. We went from 70 guitars a day down to 32 guitars a day. And, that's a big adjustment. And then, as all the other events go on, the tech crash, the move of instruments to China, domestic guitar manufacturing was dying in the 2000s. Just dying, as China took more and more and more business away. Factories were making, 100,000 guitars a year in China, and they're just shipping them over $30-40 guitars. I can't even buy a set of back and sides for $40, let alone an entire guitar. And so, that happened, and and then 2008, and anybody building guitars remembers what 2008 was like. You couldn't sell a guitar to save your life. And, nobody was buying. And so, we ended up closing the other factory, and then, we've been building back up since. We shrank really low after 2008, and then it's been climbing since, I'd say, 2012, and then during the pandemic it's just exploded. Our back order increased tenfold.
Wow.
Without exaggeration. I mean, just thousands of guitars on order at once, and I don't build that many. I don't want to build that many. So yeah, it's just a lot of change in the last 10 years.
Were you guys like, were you running some pretty conservative books to be able to kind of grow and shrink as the market was making those changes, or was it a real struggle? Like, were you kind of like, did you see the writing on the wall and have like 3 or 4 years where you were kind of planning for that?
Well, first and foremost, we're guitar makers, so we're always broke. It's the same for everybody, right? It's you sometimes you don't know where your next meal is going from. Luckily, during the 1990s, when business was very good, we had paid everything off. We had seven CNC machines completely paid off, all our equipment paid off. And we owned a building in Canada at the time, and so we had good assets, and it allowed us to ride out the really bad period between 2001 and 2012. But and the pandemic has also let us. The positive sign from the pandemic is it allowed us to buy a new factory, right? We were able to move, to this new shop. But yes, we've had to be really conservative as far as like, trying not to spend much. We've been utilizing up older stocks of wood, and just getting through. And now we're on the climb, and starting to replenish wood stocks again. And yeah,
like Fender, like I just read the other day that Fender got caught with like $100 million in stock or something, like, or backs, basically stuff sitting in the warehouse that they can't sell. Do you think, like, going through those periods of feast and famine, like, do you look at like the pandemic and were you like very clear-eyed about it and go, yeah, this is what's cracking right now, but maybe, potentially this isn't going to last forever?
Okay, so I'm going to talk for a couple minutes on this, because this is an important point for all of us, right? For small builders and large builders. Yes, during the pandemic, we saw, we've ridden the waves of feast and famine, right? We know when it's really, really good, it's going to be followed by a period of really, really bad, right? And so during the pandemic, we were making about 16 guitars a day during the pandemic. And we could have increased easily to 32 a day. I have enough equipment on my floor to build, 48 a day, probably, with just people. So just adding people, I could turn guitars quite rapidly. But we did not want to overdo it, because we knew it was going to come to an end, right? So we started the pandemic at around 12 a day. We increased to 16 a day, and then it may have gone a little bit higher, just for a little bit. And then we just stopped and just continued to build. We let our back order climb, and we still have good, healthy back order. But Fender and many of the other companies did some weird stuff at the beginning of the pandemic. Some companies went, oh my God, we got a ton of orders, we got to order deep. And so they went to China and they ordered tons and tons and tons of product, Fender being one of them. Other companies, such as Washburn, was canceling orders overseas because they were afraid of like, well, nobody's going to take these guitars. They didn't know what was going to happen. So everybody reacted differently. But in the last, I want to say the last 12 months, Fender has really done damage to our industry on a macro level. One of the things I consistently hear is, and I've heard this from multiple dealers and multiple manufacturers, is that Fender's dumped a year's worth of product or 16 months worth of product on dealers all at once. Dealers ordered being told that, oh, this is going to take 12 months to deliver. And then next month, all of it shows up. And so what ends up happening is Fender is the big guy in town. The dealers can't be without Fender. And so they have to take the goods from Fender and reject the goods from you and other smaller companies. And this has happened over and over and over again. I mean, maybe it's a very smart business move on Fender's part, right? But it's also caused a lot of problems. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Fender is sitting on millions of dollars of inventory. I read an article on GuitarWorld.com the other day that was saying, yeah, Fender has $150 million in stock. And I read the article and I'm like, this is making it look like, oh, poor Fender, right? But it's not. They made these decisions, right? They made these decisions to buy all this extra inventory, not being conservative, knowing that the gravy train was going to come to an end. And so it really hurt a lot of people. It hurt dealers who can't pay their bill. It hurt, manufacturers like us, who dealers couldn't take our guitars. And, it took a lot of time to get over it. There was a definite slow point in the middle of this year because of that Fender dumping issue.
What, who's Sandy? What, did you figure out a way to combat that Fender dump? Other than doing the same?
It really became prevalent. I mean, I'm sure most of you have experienced it as well, because it affects large and small. Everybody was really banging right up until about February of this year. Everybody's order file was kicking. And then about February, it really started to slow down. Incoming orders were really slow. Right up until the second week of August. July was one of the worst months we've had even before 2008. I mean, it was brutal. And then, but August from the middle of August on, has been amazing. We're back to almost pandemic level buying. So, we just needed to ride it out. Luckily we have some good dealers who took their back orders. We didn't get that many cancellations. We probably lost 100 guitars to cancellations, but and then you find other homes for them and so on. But I was getting a little worried, in July, seeing how bad it was. I was getting a little worried, but now I'm doing okay. I mean, mostly I was worried because I just built $1 million factory and I got to pay the bill, so yeah.
Is it more cost effective during those lulls to continue on with, say, 16 guitars a day, and then when you finish them, you just chuck them in a warehouse or somewhere like Fender did? Or to lay off workers and try and kind of ride the lull, ride the crest of the wave? So
that's a good question, and I lose a lot of sleep on that. These bags under my eyes are hard earned from that. Because as I was going through, let's say after the move in April, when we got into this building, June and July got really bad, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to have a layoff, And then I looked at my back order and I said, well, should I lay off? Should I just go a little bit longer? What do I need to do? And I said, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to replace people that quit. When you have 30, 40 people, people are going to come and go. That's just nature of things. So, between April and now, we had 7 people that went on to other jobs or moved away, and we didn't replace them, and that made a big difference. That cut down, about a fifth of my staff. Shrunk my payroll significantly, and we got through it. And now it's on the uptick, so I'm not as worried about it. But yeah, from somebody like me, I'm no different than somebody like you, right? Like I'm not made of money, right? And so I don't want to have 50 guitars or 100 guitars sitting in boxes, because every one of those, it's cost me, what, I don't know, somewhere between $1,000 and $1,500 to build that box or that guitar, and I got to sit on it in a shelf. I don't want it sitting on a shelf, because then I'm losing money, right? It's just tying up capital that I don't have. So my goal is to slow production before it reaches a point that I'm putting guitars on shelves, right? I have to juggle this idea of, you can't sell from an empty wagon. You have to have a little bit of goods, but neither do I want to be Fender and have $150 million of goods to sell, right? So, I sort of have an internal number where I'm comfortable. If I have 100 guitars in stock, I'm happy. I can sell. That means that if shit goes sideways, I can have a layoff and I can live off inventory for a little bit. That means that if things pick up, I can deliver quick. It's a comfort level. But that's, I think, the mistake Fender made, is they just kept building and kept building and kept building and taking their orders from overseas. And and now they've put themselves in trouble, right? So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
That's a good answer. Can I ask one, Beau? Can I ask one?
Yeah.
How many hats are you wearing? Are you sales staff and production staff there, or what's your breakdown of your day look like?
So that's a tough question, and it's also an important one. So one of the lessons my father taught me, that he spent a lot of time teaching me, is that if we're selling Larrivee guitars, Larrivee has to be involved, right? There has to be a Larrivee on the floor. So how I spend my days, for the last year, yeah, I've been putting out fires. It's I've been covering, if an important person quits, I step in and help the job. My dad moved away. He was doing routing for binding, which is a hard job. So, I took over for that and did that until I trained somebody. I'd say I spend 30% of my time troubleshooting. So I'll identify problems in production. I'll pull people aside, and as a guitar maker, teach and fix problems, right? I spend a lot of time explaining how things worked, explaining neck angle, explaining bridge height, explaining neck relief. I spend a lot of time working on fundamental skills with people. And that's the most important job I do, because I'm building long-term, skilled people who can troubleshoot their own work.
Are you hiring completely green people, or do you try to hire out of like some experience?
It's a mix. And this is going to be very controversial, and it's going to put me in trouble. I don't like hiring from guitar schools. I really don't. Right.
Any of them worse than others?
I won't name names, but it's I have a hard time with when people come from guitar schools, mostly because when somebody comes from a guitar school, they tend to have it in their head that the way they learned is the only way. Right. And it causes grief, because as a guitar builder, I clearly recognize there's only so many ways to build a guitar, but what makes our guitar is our recipe. It's the specific way we do certain things that make the instrument sound like a Larrivee. And when people come from guitar schools, they look at that and, well, this doesn't work. I don't like it. I want to change it. Right. They have enough information to be dangerous. Right. The guitar schools tend to teach people the basic how to perform a task, but don't really teach the troubleshooting part, which is the most important part. That's the part that comes with experience. Like, you can teach somebody to fret in 3-4 days, but you have to fret for a year before you can really troubleshoot. Like, okay, this should have a little fall away. This relief should look like this. The fingerboard's dipping to one side. That isn't right. Like the stuff that goes into troubleshooting. That's the magic. And so I with some jobs I will hire people with experience, but I generally prefer people who are green. Maybe guitar players, excited. I hire primarily based on attitude. Like, if somebody comes in and is smiling and is excited to be there, I typically will give that person a shot over somebody who went to Gallup or to somebody else. Right.
Are there any like transferable skills from any other jobs? Like, would you want like somebody who was doing finished carpentry or something like that? Like, it does seem like, at least in my experience of trying to hire and fire in a factory, like everybody that was interested in guitars, mostly what they wanted to do was stand around and talk about tone all day, and they didn't really actually know how to work. And so I would always like look for people with some finished carpentry skill or something that was actually like.
I look for people who, I ask a couple of key questions, because I hire everybody personally. I sit down, I interview everybody, and I make it a long, casual conversation. I really try to get the person comfortable so that I can get a sense of who they are. But I always ask the same set of questions. And I think the most important question I ask, and one of the things I look for, is, do you play any sports? Because that tells me a lot. Yeah, I play soccer every weekend. Okay, that tells me you can work as a team, right? Or I do fencing, right? And okay, that says I have discipline, right? So I learn a lot about that. Any kind of team sport is a big plus for me when I hire. It's not the only thing. I look for people that, yes, know how to use some tools, maybe a little bit of carpentry. I think that's a good example of those people get in the door pretty quick. People, I had a change recently of heart. I used to get a lot of people who would apply who were at the end of one career and wanted to start another. People in their 50s who are like, yeah, I just finished this career. I don't want to be a banker anymore. And I was, I just don't know. I don't think these people are going to last. And I always tell them guitar making is not a very profitable business. You don't make a ton of money, right? You're not going to come into a guitar factory and make $100,000 a year. It's just not going to happen, right? And and so I never really hired those people, but I've started to, and I've had really good luck. And I don't know if it's just I've had some good individuals, but people who did corporate work and no longer want to seem really happy being guitar makers.
Are they better at the detail stuff, or kind of just mindlessly sanding? Or
no, I work differently than other factories, and I like to think it's something special about me, but it might just be more our size. I try not to put people in one job. So, like, we're big enough that, like, we could have just a body sander or two body sanders, or just a painter, or just a final assembler, or just a fretter. But what I want to do is I prefer to take groups of people. I call them my Strike Force Delta. And so I'll have three, I have three women that will go, and in the morning they carve necks, then they go and do binding, and then they come in the climate room and brace tops, right? And that every day they get to do something different, right? They're not just mindlessly sanding. I mean, we all know over half of guitar making is sanding, right? And we all hate it, right? So, you know, if I can avoid people doing that all day long, that's a win, right? So everybody is trained in multiple jobs with only a couple exceptions, you know. So my final assemblers, you know, they stay in final assembly for the most part. But like my fretters, they know how to they come and stack wood and help me sand and run the laser. My neck sanders, you know, I already explained that one. My bodybuilder does bodybuilding and kerfing. My guy who builds frames, you know, he does that. He makes braces. He helps me run the CNC machine, empties the dust collector. You know, so everybody gets to do something different each day, and they have agency over their own job. So, you know, to go back to hiring, one of the things I now tell people when I hire them is, be the employee I don't have to worry about, right? I want to not think about you. If I have to think about you, something's going wrong, right? I'll check in with you and see, do you need help? Do you need things? But I don't need to worry about you. So, you know, that's a big thing. And I find that is probably the biggest thing for shop morale. You know, I like to think we have very, very good morale among people. And that's just because that they feel empowered, like that they're making a difference and that their voice is heard, and that they're not just automatons sanding all day long, right? It's a big thing.
Yeah, that model really seems to be way more beneficial than just one person, one job for 10 years.
Yeah.
And the morale, you want to get to work, and if you're doing 3 different interesting jobs per day, that's great.
And I know I'm a bit of a fan of reality TV. I love this show. My favorite show is this show called Big Brother, right? And one of the premise of Big Brother is you have to convince people to do something and make them believe it's their idea, right? And that's a very valuable skill. And that's one of the things I try to do, is like, I can look at a problem and I can see it, and I bring the parties involved, and I get them to give me the solution and make it their idea, right? And then they have much more agency and buy-in to anything that they're doing, right? So yeah.
If somebody's interested in, you know, color work or painting, do they come to you and say, can I slowly ease into the paint booth, and you accommodate that
Yes.
sort of thing?
Yeah, I do that. You know, and I try to word it in a way of like, okay, well, here's your daily responsibilities. If you can do your daily responsibilities in a timely fashion and the quality is maintained, you can go anywhere in the shop you want and do another job. We'll fit you in, right? Because I don't set unrealistic expectations for people, you know. So like in a factory setting, let's say if you were working at Taylor, you might be responsible to fret 20 guitars a day, right? In my factory, you're responsible to do 8 to 10, right? The work has to be premium, like they have to do a very good job, but the physical numbers that they have to do is less, and that lets them go other places, right? And then they have incentive to work hard and to work hard and work quickly and with good quality work, because they know that they can go on and learn something else that they want, right? So yeah, those are the challenges, and I get, you know, with different ages, you really have to communicate these differently. You know, the youngest generation, I have some employees now that are, you know, I have socks older than them, and they are very difficult to manage.
Hold
right?
on one
They
second.
have,
Can we talk about where you're getting your socks from? I can't get more than 3 years out of mine.
it's the gold toes from
Okay.
Kohl's. Those
All
are the
right.
best.
Thank you. Good information.
The youngest generation has the weirdest work ethic. Some of them work absolutely great, but their communication is so poor, right? They lose their temper. They really struggle with basic communication because they never did it. They've only done digital communication, right? They're kids of the pandemic. They've lived on their cell phone, and when it comes to real life, they have a very big challenge communicating and dealing with conflict and taking responsibility for themselves, right? Their personal agency. So that's been a challenge. I like them. They're hard workers. There's some very good ones. The generation after that, the millennials, are pretty good workers. Like any generation, you get good ones and you get bad ones. Most of my staff is probably made up of millennials at this point, and a few Gen Xers. I have I have one, I guess, baby boomer left that works for me, but that's that's just about it. Most guitar making is really for 20 to 40-year-olds. After that, they want to do something else, right? It takes a special soul to go beyond that. And yeah, I think that's about all I have to say on that.
Oh man, I aged out. No, it's funny that realistic expectations. When I was in string up at Breedlove, my coworker I was 30, he was mid-40s, and we had the same expectations. And I would be like, what's the problem there, Gary? I don't understand why you're having a hard time getting done with stuff. Now I realize, oh my God, like imagine trying to do a Breedlove string up day, and at 45, it would have been ridiculous. Like,
yeah,
it's but yeah, those standards, it's slippery stuff. It's slippery stuff, and finding the good mix of profitability versus like burning your staff out and burning their bodies out. And I don't know. It's
you have
stuff.
to have a good mix. Like our staff now, we're one of the factories. We probably have more women on staff than most companies. It's changed just recently. We had some long-term women leave, but we are generally over 50% women, which is fairly unusual, right? Women make the absolute best guitar builders and best guitar makers. They just excel at the fine detail work, and yeah, I'm when a woman guitar maker walks in the door, it's like, yes, I'll hire you, right? Almost sight unseen, because I know you're going to do well.
We had a woman in the finish department at Breedlove when I first got there, and when she left, it just about buried the company. Like,
yep.
And they'd put the dude in charge of the finish department, and he was not very good, but he was the dude. And it became very apparent that they made a horrible decision when she left, and he was the only one that remained.
Yeah, it's hard to survive transitions like that. I grew up being taught that nobody is, this is another one of my father's life lessons. Nobody is irreplaceable, right? But there's a few people that are close. This is a thing that goes back to one of your earlier questions, is like, what do you do during the day, right? Like, how much of your day is spent doing this? How much of your day is spent doing that? And honestly, this is a big part of what I do, is just establishing norms for departments, getting when somebody leaves, making sure that there's continuity, making sure that people flow. And this also goes back to that idea of everybody has to be cross-trained in multiple jobs, right? So if one person leaves, you're not fucked. You're not in that situation of like, oh, that woman left the paint department. What do we do? The whole department falls apart. No, it's like, no, there's 5 other people who know how to do that.
Yeah.
We can bring somebody in. They instantly become part of that team. They fit in, and we move on. right? So that's really where I spend the vast majority of my time is just getting departments to that point.
Do you
So,
rotate? Oh, sorry,
oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Matthew. Do you rotate those groups, the Delta forces? So you teach them 3 skills, and then after a year or two, you move them to another 3 skills. So eventually, everyone knows how to make a guitar from start to finish.
Not really. I don't subscribe to that in a large manufacturing setting. Like I'm not. I don't like that per se because it ends up putting too much knowledge in a few people's hands. I like them to be a little. I like them to have variation in their job to a point, right? So I want people to be able to do 4 or 5 jobs, right? But I don't want to go as far as training them to build an entire guitar, and I learned this early on. I'll use an example. One of my neighbors up the street is Guild Guitars and Cordoba Guitars, which is now Yamaha Guitars. But I have several employees from Guild who, they used to be at Guild and now they work for me. And Cordoba had a really interesting method. So when they started building guitars in America, they had, a master builder who would build the guitar start to finish. That was his guitar. And then they hired another master builder and another master builder, and they would build from start to finish the entire guitar. Well, that inherently has a lot of problems because if one person leaves, you've lost a ton of knowledge that you've trained for. But also you end up with favoritism among your customers. Oh, I don't want that guitar built by Ed. I need a guitar built by Julie, right? And then what do you do with all the guitars made by Ed, right? If your customer only wants the ones made by Julie. So I don't like that method. I do like having a couple of people who are very skilled on hand. So I have a couple of employees who are very skilled in key departments, right? So one of my guys, Alan, he runs my paint shop. He is one of the former master builders from Cordoba, and I give him all of my repairs, anything that's not raw woodwork. If it's, let's say, from bodybuilding on, he takes care of all the repairs because he's a skilled builder, but I don't have him do everything. And then I have, 1 or 2 people before bodybuilding that can repair things. But nobody really crosses each other, right? Nobody handles the entire guitar other than my dad or myself or my brother. That keeps it a Larrivee guitar in my mind.
Larrivee did wind up producing a lot of other independent guitar builders over the course of the history. There aren't like just a tremendous amount of Canadian builders like from the Larrivee shop in the old days, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, you have to remember, we were once very small guitar builders, right? In the 1970s, it was my dad and a handful of other builders, right? And it sounds glamorous, when you say like, oh, Linda Manzer and David Wren and Grit Laskin and all these people worked for my dad, and they're all these absolutely fantastic guitar makers. But the truth is, when they came to work for my dad had no money. He didn't have a pot to piss in, right? Mm-hmm. They worked for free for a long time. They used to stay in my parents' house because there was no, they couldn't afford rent, right? It was a very weird time, right? There was no guitar building in Canada at that time. And, so I don't like giving credit to my dad in those cases. Oh yeah, my dad is the reason these people are the way they are, and they're great builders. They're great builders because they put in the effort, mm-hmm. right? Linda Manzer, I'm sure she learned a lot at the factory, but Linda is who she is because she is who she is, right? She is a very talented woodworker who can build some truly amazing guitars and has a fantastic art background. I mean, she's just doing some really, really cool stuff. Grit Laskin's inlay stuff. He didn't learn it, I mean, sure, he worked around inlay with us, but all of his inlay stuff is all him. He did that himself. That isn't Larrivee at all, right? They're apprentices in that they worked in the factory, but they learned their core guitar making from from themselves. They picked it up. You see elements, right? Like
Yeah.
you can look at different people's guitars, and I actually I'm very fascinated by this because let's start with my dad, right? My dad, when he learned in the late 60s from Edgar Munch, you see this definite classical guitar influence through his early acoustics, right? And you see marquetry rosettes, enlarged classical guitar shapes. And then in the early 1970s, my dad took a tour of Martin. And you can see from the moment he took that tour, our guitar changed, right? The manufacturing processes that he saw changed who he was as a guitar maker. It doesn't mean Martin taught him, but he saw things. And then that's where the steel string guitar that made us famous really became appropriate, or became appropriate's not what's the word I'm looking for. Like it became set, right? And then from that point on, you can start to see methods that he saw at Martin, the way we bind guitars, the way we route guitars, the way we build bodies, all of that came from that tour. It was inspiration for him. And with, my dad's apprentices, they had the same thing. This was the catalyst that started it, but they're their own builders who, you might see influence, like, okay, body shapes or rosettes might look somewhat similar, or neck profiles, but fundamentally they're their own guitar builders who learned on their own. And Larrivee was just a tool for them, right? So it's I find it really fascinating.
I, not to dispute what you just said, I think you're absolutely right, but like sometimes it takes somebody giving people the permission to do something. Like building guitars, just I imagine at the time just seemed like such a far-fetched proposition, that here's this guy going, okay, I'm doing it now. Other people kind of maybe feel like they can participate in it as well. But maybe they were
At the
destined
time,
to do that.
it was a different world, right? And we cannot discount what happened back then cannot happen today, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happened in the between 1930 and 1975 will never be repeated, because it's not possible to live without making a bundle of money anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Like you living expenses are taking up 50% of your income, when before it was 10 or 15%, right? So, if you were to put in a young Linda Manzer, David Wren, Serge De Jong into a shop today, I don't know that you would get the same repeat of what happens, right? Because the real world today is different than the real world of yesterday.
Yeah.
Right. And that's probably the biggest thing, that holds back our industry now, is the sheer cost of living, right? And the sheer cost of manufacturing too.
Yeah. Part of it, I was suspected, some of those guys in the 70s got their start because, the major manufacturers were also struggling to produce functioning instruments. And so it seemed like there was an opening, and, for better or worse, the major manufacturers kind of caught up to the state of the art in what was, I guess, kind of the early boutique years. But anyway,
there's a trend, and it's happening again right now, right? There is a trend when a company transitions from being a owner operated business to a corporation, right, it becomes something different and becomes much more difficult to control. So you look at companies like Fender, who, what sold to CBS or to all these other companies, that it becomes just a commodity in a binder for some corporation, right? And then at that point, then it's like, okay, it's a commodity. Well, how do we make it more profitable? Well, we're going to cut this, and this, right? Or we're going to change this production to this, and this, right? And this happens. You're starting to see guitar brands that were once very famous be traded as commodities, right? And if their original owners had seen what they had become, they'd be rolling in their grave, right? When you start to see, like, let's look at Ovation's been sold, 3 times in the last couple of years. Cordoba has now been sold to Yamaha. Guild was sold 3 or 4 times in the last couple of years. I mean, they're just commodities, right? They're not they lose their energy, their drive, right? I like to think one of the things that makes us special is that there's somebody in charge of it, right? There is a Larrivee in charge of Larrivee. In Martin's case, there is a Martin in charge of Martin. And I worry for some of these companies that don't have heirs to them, right? We're really, my dad's great friends, and I've known him for years. Richard Hoover, Richard's not a young man anymore, right? And what happens to Santa Cruz Guitars when that goes? What happens to Bourgeois Guitars when Dana decides to retire? If it's sold, will it still be those companies, or will that just be a commodity in somebody's binder and then it starts to go by the wayside? So the long of this is in the 1990s and the 2000s, there was a real opening for quality, right? In the late 90s and in the, after that Eric Clapton Unplugged era, people were clamoring to buy acoustic guitars, right? China wasn't really there yet. So this was the golden era for people like Taylor, right? Taylor really, I mean, you cannot give enough kudos to Bob Taylor for what he did in the 1990s and 2000s, right? He really captured a need that was there that other makers didn't capture because they were a commodity, right? Martin was Martin and doing their thing, and they did a lot, but it was a golden era for people like Taylor and ourselves who really stepped up, and other companies fell by the wayside because it wasn't, it was like I said, a number in a ledger for some executive, right? Yeah. Not a guitar company.
What do you think, Beau? Should we get Matt to give us a tour?
I really want to see this factory.
Hey,
oh, gee. Yeah, I'll show you around a little bit. Let me grab the camera here.
I want to say, when I was in String Up at Breedlove, we had this crazy machine that was like a big, long belt sander with a radius platen on it. We would push the fingerboard in it to radius, or necks got glued on with the fingerboard square. And I had heard we'd gotten those machines from Larrivee. Is there any truth to that?
It's possible.
Imagine you do all
possible.
that with CNC.
We'll show them to you as we go. So let me take you to the start of the factory. It's Sunday, so everything's shut down. But when you walk in, this is the cruddy one. My good one's in the office. I don't let people near it. So yeah, when you walk in, this factory took me about 2 years to build. So I installed, you can see all the ductwork way up high. So I have all the ductwork up at 14 feet. We have 2 dust collectors, so we have one here, and this one handles, they're both indoor dust collectors, 10 horsepower. And this one handles small woodworking machines and down to fretting. And then we have another dust collector down at the other end back there, and this one is for the raw wood processing. It's also 10 horsepower, but it's dedicated really just for the planer thickness sander, etc. Let's walk down there first. So the building, what I did is I built a large climate room, an L-shaped climate room. That's where I was sitting. So, down at the end of this room, straight down at the end, you can see the wall, and then up here coming up is the other side of the L, and that's created sort of like this division of the shop. So on the back side of the L is the production, and then on this side of the L I have what we call our CNC alley. So here we do we have all the CNC machines. This is the last area we have to really still set up. So we have bridge manufacturing, and then I have a machine here specifically for fingerboards, and they do other things too. So like in here, I make electric bodies. So I have all the tools set in there. You can see like 21 different tools for making electric guitars. And, and then down here, this is our machine for making headstock inlays. So it basically, when I laid out this factory, I wanted people to be able to, let me switch camera for a second here.
What was that wall you just to your left?
Say that again? This here?
What's that?
Oh,
Yeah.
hold on. So this is a veneer clamp. So I don't have the air on right now, but what these have a cushion in them, so you can see it drops down, and basically you glue the veneer in here, and it has an air tank on the bottom. This was an employee invention, right? So we had an employee who he was an engineer. He was going to engineering school, and so he came up with this clamp, and it's got I think 32 necks on it, and we glue up 32 veneers at a time, and you can cycle it twice a day, so you can glue up to 64 necks a day on this jig. Works really well. And then basically what we do is, I don't want anybody in this shop to have to move more than 20 feet to move a guitar to another department. So, in this machine, we this is where we shape the neck. So here, this will do the front face of the neck. Then I move it into the back, and that faces the back of the neck. And then here, the truss rod slot on either side. And it's about 9 minutes for 2 necks to shape them. And that just gives a rough shape. That would be something like, let me see if I got one here. So that would be something like this. So you got a nice flat face. The length is set for whatever neck we're doing. This one is a 24.75 scale, 12 fret, 40 series guitar for us. And then the back is shaped up to a certain point. And then we have our, a ramped truss rod slot, right? I don't know if that'll focus there. So the truss rod slot is ramped so that the headstock has lots of strength. And then a couple of pins which index the neck later on, but also index the fingerboard, right? So, and then from there, they come out of this machine and then go into the veneer jig, where we have a little station here. It's just gummy and gooey and dusty. We have a glue roller, and we just roll on the veneers and put them in. Then they travel back to another machine, no more than 12 feet away, where you can see it's nice and dusty. These are 30-year-old machines, and the neck is just vacuumed on here, and that carves the shape, which I'll show you here. So here, it's hard to do this holding a camera.
Did you guys move those machines down from Canada?
Yes. So in Canada, we had 6 of them, and then we sold 2 of them to Taylor because we already had 2, and then we bought 2 Haas machines. So yeah, so that machine there shapes the heel, puts a little bit of a step on it so that you don't have to chisel away that extra material, shapes the side, and shapes the shape of the headstock. And then this machine here will do the inlay cavities, so we have, you can see it's full of miniature end mills for doing various headstock inlays, and some jigs for vacuum holding. I do a lot of vacuum holding. And then back here we do, inlaying. So you can see we're, doing some fancier inlays. There's a very fancy inlay. And, and then we glue them in and they go off for sanding.
Your mum used to hand do that stuff, right?
Yeah. So my very first job when I was younger was to operate the pantograph. So, I would sit in the pantograph when I was 10 years old, cutting inlays, little zigzag inlays for electric guitars. And then when I got out of school, I started working on the CNC machines. And I think that's the thing that's made me successful is I'm a CNC programmer and a guitar maker. So I can do both and I can make creative jigs. I'm good at, let me show you behind you here. So like here, this is like a wall of jigs, and I've built every single one of these myself, so like this is for making Telecaster type necks, bracing face plates. I mean, these are all face plates. Here's my bracing jig, so here you can see this does the radius on the back and the taper on the neck, and then you switch the different face plates. So like, let's say today I need to make, what does this one say? Short back taper, 260 millimeter, right? That one's not finished yet, but I just pull whatever one I need, boom, shove it in the machine and done, right? So I'll cut, this is a brace I'm going to work on tomorrow. So this is 305 short back braces. And then I'll run them in the machine and they look like this. They come out as a set plate, and then I rip them on the table saw, or I get one, somebody to do it. Most of the time it's me. And then that'll make enough braces for that one brace for about 5 months. I'm a firm believer in guitar manufacturing that most of your time is spent in setup, right? So if you've invested the time to set up, you should really make a lot, right? So if I'm going to make 50 of something, then I'm going to make 500 of something, right? And just take the extra time, and then I don't have to do it for 6 months. So yeah, let's see here. So then this building had a nice little nook, right? So back here, and this is where I put all the heavy equipment. So here I have a big Tanowitz bandsaw. This is this particular one was made in 1908, and we've had it a long time. We had this one in America. My dad got it in a yard sale in LA for $800, and then we fixed it up, repainted it, and it operates great. And then a couple of thickness sanders back there. So I've got the one on the right. That time saver is coarse grit, that's 80 grit, and then 120 grit. So basically you can feed from one end, 80 grit out, 120 grit out. And then, a big rotary planer. This is like, Taylor has one of these, we have one of these. And then you can see back there, kind of hidden back there, is the one I bought from Michael. Yeah, so it's, Friday we were stacking wood. I just got a big shipment of mahogany in, so we're stacking wood. I dry wood really, really quickly. This is what we do is we take this and we just put it outside. So, bay door right there, and the wind, I just let the wind go through it. And you can dry mahogany in as little as 2 weeks. You can dry rosewood in about 4 weeks, and bone dry, to the point that I haven't had a crack. I mean, you guys are all repair people. I mean, when was the last time you saw a Larrivee with a crack? It just doesn't happen. Ebony I'll dry a lot longer, so here is a couple pallets of ebony. Those will dry. Some bridges, veneers. These I leave inside, and this ebony's been drying for a year. I'll probably leave it another, I'd say it's ready to go, but I'll leave it for another 6 months, as long as I can.
Is that mahogany, are the ends sealed, like with wax or something? Or is the open?
Yeah, it's got this stuff, this particular stuff is not, but but it's already somewhat dry. This stuff I'm bringing in from Spain. It's when I say mahogany, I use that term loosely these days. This is Kaya. Kaya, which one is this? Kaya Anthrotheca, which is, I think, my favorite of them. We're also experimenting with, let me see if I got some over here. I'm also experimenting. This is the same stuff Taylor has been using for neck stock. This is mid-grade. This is all neck blocks, and this is Swetania mahogany. And so it's Cuban mahogany grown in India, and there's no CITES on it. So it's very easy to ship, which is great.
Are the pores
so we're
like Cuban mahogany?
Yeah, it works really nice. It bends really easily. It fills really nice. The pore filler we use works great on it. It's got a nice shimmer to it. You'll see some sets as we go. And we're just starting now with some of it, because Kaya for necks, I mean, take a look at this. You all are familiar with this. You get a bad board, and I mean, look at the fuzz that comes out on Kaya next to another neck of Kaya, and it's fine, right? So you don't get that with the Swetania mahogany. Yeah, and here's side bending. So we have two large molds, sets of 4, and these are interchangeable molds. So we just load, here's a slope dreadnought, OP, that's our parlor, standard OM, and and basically we do the same thing everybody else does, except our heating method is different. We use a transformer and just hook up a big positive and negative terminal to it, flood it with high amperage, and it heats up to about 280 degrees. We put the wood on top, wet, just spritzed wet, and wrap the wood. We have sheets of perforated stainless steel, and we just wrap those around the mold. I was hoping one was done up, but it's not. And hot pipe.
Is your side thickness, the wood thickness, the same thickness for each model size?
Yeah. So the Larrivee formula for us, we use a side that's 2.5 millimeters on the button. And, everything is the same thickness for sides. Backs get a little different. Tops, we use one thickness for all our tops. And it really helps with that. Tops, we laser. Let's see if I can show you some here. Right, so we have a big laser. And what was I doing at the end of the day? I use this for everything. So here I'm making flat work. So these are the little sound hole reinforcements. I spend time getting the maximum yield I can out of it. Tops, we laser, and I identify them. So here is, I'm making a jumbo type guitar, and I'll laser in the model number, our batch number, our serial number, and any special notes. So like this is one of our 03 series, which wouldn't normally get an abalone rosette, but I laser it on so that down the line, somebody else will know, oh, this needs an abalone rosette, same here. Then they go into the CNC machine, very simple little jig to vacuum it down. And I load in, I have these spinners with carbide teeth, which will do the rosette. Rosette takes 11 seconds, and then it's done.
And plastic purfling in your...
No. So I don't want this to sound like I'm tooting my own horn, because it's not. But I make all my own purfling and binding completely. I make rope. I make herringbone. I do them myself. Let's see if I've got some over here. So this is my station where I do it here. I have a little machine from China, which this is my spaghetti strip cutter. So I take, strips of binding and, feed them through, and out comes the strips. And I built a hot press. This was, it's a little dirty right now, and I can't turn it up or down, but, the table closes here. There's heating elements. You can see under there. So there's 3 large 36-inch heating elements there, and they come into one of the standard LMI heating what do you call this? The heating boxes, and I can just raise and lower it with a switch, and then I sandwich all my binding. Then when I take it out, I put it in a vacuum table to squeeze it shut. Whew, I'm losing my breath. Oh yeah, here you can see. Here's a piece of. I'm just gonna put the phone down for a sec. So here I'm making. This is a leftover piece of rope. So I make everything myself. So we make the pieces of rope. Then this is going to get another layer put on top of it, and then cut into binding strips. So if you look, go over into binding. See what I got. So this kind of stuff. I make all of this myself. I make all my own strips. So black strips. I make all my own black, white, black. I make all my own wood bindings. So that's flame maple with a black, white, black. I make my own koa bindings, herringbone. I kind of took a lesson from Leo Fender in that. I watched, and one of the things that influenced me was early on, Leo Fender would make all his own hardware. He would make Telecaster bridges. He'd make, control plates. He made everything himself. And I really liked that idea. I liked the idea of being independent and like, oh, if I need it, I'll make it. Right. Guitar makers today, like factory guitar makers today, it's scary how little stuff they actually make. Guitar makers don't even make their own braces anymore. I can't even imagine that, and because that's who you are. So like in our room here, let me go in the room.
Matthew, I was just gonna say, I don't see any like build cards or clipboards or anything. How are you keeping track of the work?
So each guitar I label specifically. So like if you look inside a guitar here, let me zoom in. So like here, this is a D40. It's got the serial number, which can be looked up in the computer, and it tells the things that people need to know at that time. So like this is getting a reserve grade Moonwood top, and it's getting a Vine logo and a rosewood heel cap. And so, certain things get put on the guitar at certain times so they don't get missed. So, and that's training that I put in at times. So if something needs a special rosette, you saw when I lasered it, it's going to be lasered on the top. If something needs a special neck, it's going to be put on inside the guitar, because it's very easy to miss something. I need it to be in people's faces, right? So let me see if I can show another example. I'll go into the routing room here.
That area under the fingerboard extension that you laser some stuff, is that there on modern Larrivees, but it's on the inside, or is it under the fingerboard?
No, the stuff that's lasered is stuff that it goes under the fingerboard. Yeah, so like it's still there on modern Larrivees, right? So here, let me switch camera here. Sorry, it's hard to walk around and show you. You're getting a weird view here. So like we'll write certain things on the guitar so that they don't get missed. So like it's written 12 string right on the guitar. This one is going to get a radial rosette, right? So it will, this is one of my favorite rosettes. I do a zebra wood rosette that's radial, but it would have been lasered right here, radial rosette. So when the top went to the person to do the rosette, they go, oh, radial, and it doesn't get missed, right? So, and sometimes if it's really complex, we'll put another label where we'll say like, this is a really custom one, right? So this guy wants no headstock logo, with mahogany head plate. He wants mahogany body binding. He wants micro dots. He wants a deluxe fretboard inlay on the 12th fret. This guitar is going to get built 3 or 4 times wrong because it's so complex, right? And basically I have key spots along the way where somebody has to catch the people are trained to catch certain things. So like in body assembly, people are taught to look for things that say short scale, 12 fret, 14 fret, different scale lengths, right? So yeah, let me continue with the tour here. So in this area here, this is what we call our kerfing area. And so it starts over here where we're building the frame. So after side bending, they come to this saw. This one's from 1918 and came from our Canadian shop. And, we cut the sides and we have, little ingenious jigs. So like just MDF molds, and you just put the side in, your side sits right there, clamp it in, and we put a fence on the saw, and you just feed it right through, and out comes, your side cut to the exact length. You just touch it on the edge sander, and away you go. And you've got perfectly cut sides, right? So there's a bunch of sides. These ones are already cut, right? So they've been cut on the saw. They just need to be trimmed, or they just need to be hit on the edge sander, and they're ready to glue up. And, and then this is the kerfing department. So I have 4 benches here. Each person can do about 12 a day. So I've got plenty of benches, enough to grow the company really quick, right? So if sales pick up and I want to grow, I can do that very, very quick. And then when I moved into this building, this room is my favorite room in the entire shop. So this is a negative pressure sanding room. And basically you can see a little dust on the floor over there, but it stops at the exit because there's always suction in this room. You can see all the dust vents coming in. There's no doors. It's just open. So anything that makes a ton of dust happens in here. So, these are the bowl sanders. You all know what these are like, right? So you have the top and the back, and, big suction on them. And then his table where he, loads the molds, and 2 edge sanders for side sanding. We don't scrape the guitars. I don't use plastic binding. I hate plastic. So we use wood binding on everything. And so we just bring the bodies in here and put them, sand them on the edge sanders. And then we have a stroke sander for sanding the top and back.
What grit is on that edge sander for the sanding the sides?
We use 2 of them. I like to use, we have a family disagreement about this. For me, I like to use 60 grit to start. So like this is a 60 grit on here now. It's been used for grinding mother of pearl. I use paper belts when I can. And then I do, so 60 on this sander, and then 120 on this sander. So basically, you come here and you sand your body here. You walk over to this sander, you sand 120 here, and you bring it over to the stroke sander, and boom, you stroke sand the body. So the guitar never has to move more than 6 feet. All 3 are started at the same time, and you go one to the other. And from binding to rough neck fit takes about a minute and a half. So it's very, very quick. And then, a bladder sander. But the nice thing is the dust from these very dirty machines are entirely controlled in here. Ooh, I'm gonna catch my breath. So after kerfing, they're brought into climate room here. So, and then here we have our Go bar racks. So everything is still put together by Go bars for the bodies. We use a fretboard extension block. So, like many people these days, the fretboard extension, which is angled at 1 degree. And so when we glue up the top, you can see we have a little ramp sliding down here. So that it's sitting on the perimeter and the ramp is sitting downwards. We can't do it right on the flat surface. So we had to make a little donut there. And the benches are really basic, right? Like they're just a basic bench. They've got their basic tools. These are for locating the sound hole. So there's the diameter of the sound hole against the body. So you can just pull the top right to the right spot and it's done. A little bit of artwork from my employees. And, so we have a couple benches in here where we can do that. Basic, same sticking of tops and backs like everybody else, just more of it, right? So our policy is we bring everything in this room for a minimum of 72 hours. And typically I like a little drier room than other people. I've got the unit off so you guys could hear me, but typically I'm running, it's warm in here today, but typically I'm running about 37, 38, 39% to about 75 degrees. I eventually will bring it down. And we bring everything in here, right? So this is the straggler pile. This is just the junk you got to get rid of. After binding, all the guitars come in here over the weekend, in various frames. So you will see, somebody was talking about build sheets. You will see, a few build sheets around. That's from our computer system. And, we match everything up. We're still dealing with the remnants of our move, where we have a lot of stragglers. So, this is the guitars from the last couple of days brought in, creative guards on machines.
You said you use Go bars, but was that a bank of vacuum clamping things? Was that for the back braces?
This is for the top and back braces. So we have 4 for back braces, which you can see right here, and then 4 for top braces. And we don't really make classical guitars these days, but these ones are for classical guitars. And instead, we just have all our chisel sharpening lined up there.
Is that all DMT, or what is that? Sharpening station?
What?
Oh, all
yeah, just all the sharpening stones. So we're using those diamonds, yeah, sharpening stones from Easy Lap.
Okay.
And so, we have, there's a dull one and a sharp one. I have 300, 600, 1200. I can't remember the other ones. I really only use the coarse and the fine myself. So the L-shaped climate room, this side is where all the bodies get built. And you can see all the braces. So this is a project I'm actively working on right now. One of the big challenges for a guitar maker, I think, in fact, the main challenge is body assembly, because as a major, when you're building more than one at a time, when you're building one a day or 5 a day or 100 a day, the real challenge for any manufacturer is body assembly, because you think of any other department, you only need a couple of parts, right? So if you go into kerfing, you need a couple strips of kerfing and some glue, and you're good to go. If you're in side bending, you need your sides, a head block and a tail block, and you're good to go. If you're in body sanding, you need a body and some sandpaper, you're good to go. But in body assembly, you need 20 different parts in order to successfully get out of the department. So you have to have 16 different braces. You need to have a top, you need to have a back, and you need to have a frame, right? And if one of those parts falls down, you don't have body assembly, right? So from a guitar making standpoint, this is your logistics right here. Everything else is simple and easy to do. But if you don't, you have to really be on top of everything, right? So if you look, all our brace bins, they're all full, right? So we have lots of X braces to go from. And, I can see like, oh, okay, I'm running out of thumb beams. Well, I better hurry for that. But I've got overflow. So I always have lots and lots of braces ready to go. And I have to be on top of tops and backs as well. So all our production is done in batches, right? So if you look at any guitar, you can easily find a batch number. So this is batch 84. And so you'll see batch listings throughout the shop. Let's see if I can find one here. It's this one. Yeah, so there's batch 84. And what they'll do is they work from the batch. So the ladies come in the morning and like, okay, I've got this one, I got this one, I got this one. So you can see we're missing 10, right? But those 10 are stranded until they move. So they actively have to work to get those 10 guitars. And that's really the hard part of factory guitar making, is coordinating this room. because again, it's so many parts. It's rosette strips, it's abalone for sound holes, it's the top itself, it's the back itself, it's back strips, it's bridge plates, it's X braces, lasered plates, pieces. I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong. And again, if one goes wrong, suddenly you have a rack of stragglers, right? That, oh, one top is missing, right? And now that's sat there for a month, and somebody has to come and pick it up and figure out what's going on. And that's an experienced person. And that's the hard part. So my current goal is really getting that dealt with. And then let me switch camera here.
What
So
radius are your backs and tops, Matthew?
Say that again, please.
What radius are your backs and tops?
Oh boy, the back, I want to say it's one of those things I don't think about on a regular basis. I think it's 16 foot on the back, and then on the top, the thumb beam is radiused. The X brace is slanted but not radiused. So, and I do this to generate. My dad did this originally to generate tension, right? So that it's not fully radiused, it's partially radiused, and that forces the top into a radius, but the braces are not radiused. So it like the X brace and the cross braces are not radiused, so it forces it into tension, right? Which is our, that's sort of the Larrivee thing, right? We like it that way.
Did you put a dome on the sides, on the curving insides?
On the top, no. On the back, yes. So the top is dead flat. Like the perimeter of the top is dead flat, with the exception of the fingerboard extension block, right? So let me see if I can find my little jig here. Where the heck it is. There it is. So we have these all over the shop. Those are just a little, they look like 90 degree, but they're actually 91 degree. And, so we can, basically, if you are looking at a top, you can see like, oh, it's slanted upwards just ever so slightly. So we check that at multiple spots. So the thumb beam is radiused. So we have, a curve here, which forces this area up, and our X brace is slanted downwards, but from here it's flat. But because it's glued on, it's held at tension slightly up, which does give it a little bit of curve, but the braces are not actually, the braces down here are dead flat, so that they generate tension across the top. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Let me put this back, otherwise I'm going to be yelled at tomorrow. Yeah, so this side of the shop here, or of the climate room, is right now for the week. When people go home at night, they bring all the racks in the climate room here. This side of the climate room is kept a little bit higher, so here we're at about 40%. And some wood is stored in here, and we store bodies. And last week I was sorting out onesie twosies and stacking rosewood and mahoganies, and everything just gets stacked and put in here, and then we can draw from it very quickly. Let's see. So once the body is built, we bring it out of the room, hits the side sanders and the stroke sander, and we doors. Yeah, so you already saw binding, right? And you can see some of the various strips. So, and like I said, we just make it all. So koa, rosewood, regular plain maple binding, stuff with a black strip attached. And we put our repairs out on racks. This is stuff I still got to deal with, fingerboard replacements, but they're out visible so people see them. We try not to leave them under a bench. Here's an interesting area. This is bridge glue. So after paint and after the neck is final fit, we bridge glue the guitar. For each nut width, I have 10 different bridges. So if you look here, I start, so this is standard 1 3/4 bridges. And I start, let's see if it'll focus. I start at 7mm tall. So at the center, this is a very thin bridge. Then I go up to 7.5, 8, 8.5, half-millimeter increments, right up to 11mm, which is a much thicker bridge, obviously. And so, you know, if there's variations in neck angle, you know, if somebody didn't sand the block properly, I can pull any thickness bridge so that the plane of the neck runs perfectly into the top of the bridge. And you end up with a, you know, a perfect height saddle every time. So, you know, we have, and we name the parts. So we're like, I'm looking here, this is for 00, 000, and SD, right-handed, 2.25 spacing, 9mm height. And this is the part number, 8714. And this is also the NC file name on the computer. So my bridge gluer can go, oh, I'm out of 8708. The bin is empty. So he just goes over to my CNC guy and says, I need part number 8708. He pulls that up, makes the part, and he's got bridges. You know, various racks with electrics. So
are you using Python for most of the construction?
Say that again, please.
Are you using Titebond for construction glue?
No, I use the glue I use is it's a standard PVA glue. It's the glue that LMI uses for. I gave it to LMI for their LMI Woodworkers glue. So what I use is the LMI Woodworkers glue, but not under its LMI name.
Ooh, you got some trade secret stuff there.
Yeah, but I'll you know, if somebody asks me really nicely, I'll tell them after LMI is no longer around. But okay. LMI is done right by me, so I have to I do right by them. So in the paint shop, we have 3 downdraft tables, 1, 2, and 3. So these don't go into a dust collector. They are pressurized downwards into trays, and the people just operate here, and you know, and so we can have 4 people at each station, right? So you can see I've run air lines across. We have 2 orbitals on either side, so 4 people can work here on each of the 4 benches. So this one is for buffing and for satin prep. This one is for raw wood for bodies, and then back there is for in-between coats of paint. And you know, and then let me turn on the lights to the spray booth here. I'll take you in the booth. We're processing after the move. We have to do, you know, chemical storage. So like we're getting all our flammable cabinets set up, and I have all of this old paint I got to take to the dump, and it's in California. It's a real pain in the butt to get rid of. So in here, so this is the inside of the spray booth. We have 1 spray booth right now for doing everything. So you know, it standard intake and then goes out through outtake, and away you go. So this is satin prep for Monday. Those will be shipped on Tuesday. You know, a rack of base coat, and you know, a rack of electrics. So we're doing a rack of black, and I think those ones are ice blue. You know, I don't do UV anymore. We got rid of our UV ovens. We stopped, I'd say after Lawrence McFadden went out of business, we stopped using UV. From now I only use catalyzed. So, and then in here, this is our pour fill room. So we do rub-on pour filler in this room, and you know, nice and clean. And we have air intake from inside the shop, and then blows straight out to the outside there. And then, yeah, that's the spray booth.
Did you make the switch to Seagrave after McFadden switched, or did you move on to somebody else?
We tried, but it wasn't the same. They said it was the same, and it wasn't. And so from there, we switched to a modified varnish, which we had used a different brand previously in the past with it was a Chemcraft product called 47390, which is my favorite guitar finish. I can still get it in Canada, but it's not there. I can't get it here easily. And then we used a modified varnish from, I think it was from Cardinal, and then one from TCP Global, and I didn't like it. So here we have a buffing room. So you can see all the individual buffing wheels. And again, dust stops at the door, right? So all the buffing compound and the fluff and everything is contained. And, they have nice overhead lights. He tapes off part of the window so that the shadows don't do certain things. He has freedom to organize buffing how he wants. And then fretting. Close that.
You fret after finishing?
Yes. So what we do, I'll take you back into final fit here. So after paint, we paint the body and the neck separately, right? So here you can see the body and the neck separate. Then they're glued up. And this allows us to, you're going to have some hump no matter what you do, right? You can get close, but you're going to have some hump. So we take that, again, no more than 20 feet, walk out the door, into the fretting department.
Oh, there's the machine.
Right there. So this is, if you're a Letterkenny fan, we got a little Letterkenny sticker on there. So yeah, these are platens. We call them railers, and so it's got 16-inch radius on the. We do a straight 16. We used to do a compound 16 to 21, but I like straight 16. And basically, I can't turn them on because the air is not on. But we crown the fingerboard, and then then we use the standard. I got to talk to these guys. This is messy. We use the standard StewMac radius beams and just flatten it and apply a little bit of fall away at the end. And, and then it goes off to bridge gluing. And then last but not least is final assembly. The employees all miss my dad. So there's little posters of John everywhere. He'd walk around, no talkie, more worky. So they remember him that way. And so so final assembly, so nice and quiet in here, and standard benches. We're slowly replacing it. I bought this one here. It's covered in stuff right now, but this is the exact same bench that Sweetwater uses for their 50-point inspection, and I have all the specs, and I'm building a proper bench here. So basically, we're going to mimic what Sweetwater does, right? And be able to inspect the guitars the same way they do. Sweetwater has become one of our 2 or 3 biggest customers, and then here's shipping. So we want to satisfy them, but their inspection system works great. So here's shipping, so everything boxed, ready to go, and for various dealers, and they're going to go out the door. There's a shipment for Spain getting ready to go if he'd pay his bill, and that's it.
Doug wanted to know how you install the frets. Are you whacking? You're pressing?
No, we're whacking away.
Yeah.
We're big fans of whacking. For us, we haven't been able. I wouldn't say that we're doing the pressing or the hammering because it's better. I think we're doing the pressing really because I haven't been able to design a great press for an acoustic, right? Yeah. Electric's easy to press, but a press for acoustic is a challenge. I haven't seen a great design yet. It came close, but just not there.
How long does it take? Oops, sorry.
Oh, I'll send you an idea afterwards. Cool.
I appreciate that.
Matthew, how long does it take for a body that's ready, you know, it's been sanded to go from the humidity room to shipped out?
We've got it real quick. So the people think catalyzed finish is a pain in the ass to work with. It's not. It's no more than UV finish, because theoretically UV finish, you can paint and you can take it and buff it. Like yes, I've cured it, now I'm gonna go to the buffing and buff it. If you've ever worked with UV, you know that guitar is gonna fail. It's the finish is gonna sink. It just doesn't work. UV finish is not good stuff. It has problems. It takes about, no matter what, you still got to let it sit 3-4 days to do its basic curing, whether UV cured or whether cured with cobalt and peroxide. Catalyzed finish is a known, and it takes 3-4 days before you can start working with it. So it's the same. So I don't like dealing with UV finish. The stuff stinks. It's the cobalt and the peroxide are dangerous. So really, it still takes me the same, maybe one extra day in paint. I think our guitars enter the paint shop and they come out of the paint shop 4 to 5 days later. And with UV, that was 3 to 4 days. So I added 1 day by using catalyzed polyurethane. But from the time we rough neck fit and body sand, the guitar will ship, I'd say 11 days later.
Wow.
So normal production time from the time we actually select a set of wood on a standard catalog guitar, our normal production time is about 8 weeks. If I am walking a guitar through, I can do it in 3 weeks. But on average, it's 8 to 12 weeks to really get a guitar through. The hardest part remains, like I said, the logistics in a climate room where you have to get 20 something parts together, right? That's where things fall apart. Or in custom stuff, like, oh, this needs a special inlay, or the guy only wants the 12th fret inlay, not the whole thing, right? And then you have to, the guitar gets put aside, sits for a couple of weeks, and then somebody has to pick it up and move it. But just standard catalog stuff goes pretty quick.
Beau, should we open it up to the heathens?
Yeah.
Any of you guys got any questions? I know Dave Stouty wants to talk guitar factories.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Dave, you want to talk guitar factories for a second?
Stouty.
I just started gluing a brace. No, I started working at Taylor Guitars in 1997 in a final assembly, and I think we were making about 70 guitars a day.
Yep.
Your shop and everything you said reminds me of the good old days there. But I don't be afraid not to voice your opinion about hiring guitar people, because they made it real clear to me. I had about 4 or 5 years of repair experience, and they flat out said, we've had some repair guys come in here do really well, but most of them we end up firing.
Yeah.
Just take everything you think you know and forget it. Do it our way or it's the highway. And that's what I did. So
I live sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to
I can
interrupt
totally
you.
understand your concern and your opinion. I agree with your opinion on that.
I have an expression which has stuck with me. My son's fencing coach told it to me once, and we all think we know it, but we don't, right? What's the old expression? Practice makes what?
Perfect.
No, permanent. And that is the biggest lesson I took in the last several years, is that if somebody learns something the wrong way, it's permanent. Yeah. And undoing that is very, very challenging.
Yeah.
Right. So if you started at a guitar school and you learned a particular way and then you practice it, that's in your head is the way. That's the permanent way for you, right? And there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? So it what works for you may not work for us or for other people, right? So yeah, I'm glad you recognize that, because that's a big piece of advice I give to any guitar maker. When people talk about, well, I'm thinking of going to guitar school, or I want to be a guitar maker, how do I do it? It's you have to be able to let go of preconceptions, right? Because it's the things you learned are not necessarily true or perfect, right? And just the same for me. Like if I walked into the Taylor Guitar Factory, I'd be a fish out of water. I would understand a lot of things, and I would have to learn the Taylor method, the Taylor recipe to do that. And that can be humbling. If you have a big ego, that's a real challenge. If you,
Oh, yeah.
I like to think I have no ego, right? And so it's, I can eat some humble pie, and if I had to do that, I would do that, right? Yeah, it's just being flexible is a hard thing for luthiers. I've heard all kinds of things that from supposed masters, that little things that bug me. The idea of like, oh, you can't shave a bridge, that's terrible. You're a hack if you shave a bridge. I'm like, what's the difference between me using a 7mm bridge or a 10mm bridge from day to day? That's the same thing, as long as I adjust the saddle slot, right? Or oh, I can't believe there's a shim on that dovetail. Oh my God, that's horrible. That guitar is a piece of shit. Well, every guitar maker has used a shim and a dovetail from time to time. That's how you get the thing tight. Wood expands and contracts. If you fit it when it's contracted, you got to put a little shim in there. It's just a little paper shim, right? That's the normal way, right? And it doesn't mean the guitar is bad. It doesn't mean that your guitar making is bad. It's a different way, right?
I also agree with your idea that you can't have a single like master guitar luthier there. You need to have people that can specialize. At Taylor,
I agree.
they had a concept at one point where they wanted everyone to be able to work on every guitar. Traditionally, there was one guy in every department that worked on the presentation series. And Bob said, I want any guy to put together a presentation series. Well, that ended it real quick, because that guy had been there for 20 years. And here's a guy that's been there for 3 years and says, well, I can do the presentation series now. I want to make what he makes. Why am I not as valuable as him?
Yeah.
So that kind of squashed that idea.
It leads to all kinds of problems, right? It's really, like what I was saying with the customer, Cordova experienced this. Their old builder, Andrew Enns, he's a very talented guitar builder. And then my builder, Alan, right? Alan is a very talented guitar maker, but somehow, for whatever reason, customers wanted, Andrew's guitars instead of Alan's, and there was no reason. That was what happened, right? So little stuff like that.
What's the most coveted position in guitar factory, do you think? Like final assembly?
Depends who you ask. I think to a final assembler, no. I think to anybody who's not a final assembler, yes.
Yeah.
To me, I think the most coveted spot is final neck fit. I think that's the highest skilled job in the factory. I like to think what makes, how do I explain this? If you're a small maker, let's say you have a couple employees and you're transitioning to a medium-sized maker, one of the challenges you're going to face is being able to break tasks down into manageable pieces that don't require high skill, right? So this is the thing that made my dad very successful. He was very good at it, is he could take any complex job and break it into very simple components, right? So, you know, you want to do binding. Okay, well, you know, you have the strips ready to go. You get it to the point that one person is doing the routing. Okay, well, that's really easy. You know, you can train routing. Then the next person, they're just gluing the strips on, right, and then taping it into place. And then the next person is sanding it. You don't have to have one person who is a master at all three, right? It's breaking the job down. But final neck fit is one of the few places you can't skimp on skill, right? You either have the chops or you don't, right? You either know how to use a chisel or you don't, right? And so, like, I mean, right now in our company, I only have one person who is able to final neck fit, and then myself, my dad, and my brother. So, you know, if my final neck fitter is away or is taking a vacation, I'm final neck fitting, right?
So he's doing 16 final neck fits a day.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on, you know, we kind of make it a competition. You know, I walk by and you know, I look at him and he does a great job. You know, he's a really good guy and he's got a great attitude. And you know, I see him like, wow, you got your 12, you know, today he was doing 12, like you got your 12 done today and it's only like 1:30. Great job. And then I'll tell him, you know, I did 12 and it was like 9 o'clock in the morning. You know, just set him straight. You know, my record, you know, my record is 46 guitars in one day. You know, it's just a little healthy competition there. But you know, I always let him know that he's doing a good job.
Cool. What do you think? Anybody else? Anybody else got anything?
Yeah. Hey, hi, Matt.
Oh God.
Oh, here we go. No,
The distinguished gentleman from the great.
Is this significantly bigger than where you were?
No, it's about 2,500 feet bigger.
Oh,
And it's just properly organized, right?
Yeah, looks great.
When we built the other shop, it was never meant to be a production facility, because what we were going to do in that shop was transfer bodies from Canada and then finish them. But then when the 2008 happened, we closed the factory up there and had to move everything into that little factory, right? The old factory was 16,000 feet. And the shop in Canada was 33,000 feet. We closed a 33,000 foot facility and fit it into a facility that was already full, right? So it was a mess. Yeah, so this factory is just much better organized, and you know, you don't have to travel with the guitar. That's the big thing.
Yeah, no, it looks great. I have one other question. If it's around, I didn't see you while you were roaming around, and if you're willing to, because there's some electric nerds out there, is the greatest pickup winder ever built available to be shown?
It's a little disorganized because I was setting that up last week, but I'll take you up there. It's not the greatest one, but you know, we have
pretty wild, buddy.
I have a couple of them. I have 5 pickup winders total.
Of all that same design?
No, I have three modern ones, and then I have so these are the modern winders. So these are Lisona. Well, not the exact same model. This is the same brand of winder and same mechanism that the PAFs were wound on.
Yeah.
So here, you know, I'm winding Telecaster pickups here, and you know, these are old machines. This one was from the Evans Guitar Company, you know, and it's like the panel off the back is off so that it can cool down. But this was our original one. So this was the one my dad made in 1984, and a guy named Glenn McDougall out of Saskatchewan helped him. You know, the guy was a tinkerer and basically just made a pickup winder from an old fan motor, you know, and some pulleys on a lathe, and it's got an old fan switch. I mean, it still works. And then I'm still unpacking here, but I made a modern one sitting in a bin down there. I made that about 15 years ago.
That's the one I'm talking about. That thing is bonkers.
Yeah. And then, yeah, so these ones do most of my work, you know, and you can see finished
Yeah.
Telecaster ones.
I still
Again,
have the bridge telly one you gave me. It's bitching, man. And for
yeah, oh, you should
those-
try the neck one. I do an
You never gave me
Alnico's
one.
Fix Telecaster neck. Oh, it's so good. So
Well,
good.
I'll get one for sure. But for those that don't know, Matt was one of those ultra pickup nerds. You were like one of the first people to do the metallurgy tests and all that stuff on PAFs and original Tele
Yeah.
50s Teles and stuff, like way back.
Oh,
Nacho's got a bunch of your research and all that stuff.
yeah, I mean, I'm a pickup nerd, right? So when I started, um, we started electrics a second time in 2007, and we started making you know, humbuckers and stuff like that. We were guitars with humbuckers, like Les Paul style, and some P90s. And you know, we were using Seymour Duncans and Lawlers. And then when 2008 hit, I fell on hard times, right, with the running two factories and sales slowing down, and I couldn't buy Lawlers anymore, you know. And I still feel horrible about this to this day. I had to cancel a large order on them, and I started making my own pickups at that point because it was cheaper, and I had supplies, and I had a winder. And so I started making it. And then you know, as the economy got better, I made a couple of savvy trades. I traded a friend one of our electrics for a broken authentic PAF. And so I was able to take a broken one apart and do all kinds of testing on it. And I sent out all the metal parts on it for metallurgical testing, and I cloned them. Very accurate machining of parts and pieces. You know, I found not the exact model, but the same make and guts of the same winder that was used, and then I really cloned the PAF pickup, I mean, down to a T. And then I did the same thing when it came to Teles. You know, I love Teles, and I love Tele bridge pickups, and so I spent a lot of time. I have a collection of vintage Fender pickups from you know, ranging from 1950 to 1957. And you know, I've dismantled a couple. I've had the magnets analyzed, and yeah, I mean, I could tell you all kinds of things about vintage Tele pickups that you know, might be surprising, but they you know, I end up with a Tele pickup that I just love. I'm a nerd.
Joe
Very
Wilkins, are you there?
Yes, I am.
What do you think of all
Oh, that sounds like a wealth of information
that?
right there.
Yeah.
Ask away. I'll tell you anything you want to know. I don't know. I mean, it's all research I've done, but I'll tell you anything you want to know about the pickups.
Oh, that's very kind. I'll pick your brain another time, actually.
Right.
But thank you.
Do you sell the pickups, Matt, individually, like in sets?
Yeah, I mean, I don't put them up on my website, but if a builder wants to use them, I would have no problem selling them. You know, it's I usually have them all made, so you know, if somebody needs a couple of pickups, yeah, I'll send them to you.
I want one now.
They're sweet.
Yeah, the neck pickup on the Tele is my favorite. I think that's my favorite pickup I've made. And then when we did it, I loved my bridge pickup beforehand. Then I made a Tele neck, and it just sounded so fantastic that suddenly my bridge pickup, we had to adjust it. And one of my employees came up with a better recipe for the bridge pickup, so we just altered it. And now they're just perfect. I love Teles because it is a raw. It to me, it is what an electric guitar should be. It's just raw. It's just like a couple of coils and a switch, and that's it. There's nothing to it, right? There's no fancy humbucking. It's just raw.
All right.
That 2
Wow.
hours.
That was 2 hours. that's really good. I personally want to thank you guys, both Beau, for making this happen, and Matthew, thank you so much for taking the time to give us a great kind of insight on the state of guitar manufacturing, some good tips also for people that are maybe thinking about. It's surprising, you know, you think as an independent builder, I think a lot of guys don't understand how much good actionable items there are from large scale manufacturing for small independent builders, including more worky, less talky. So
it's very true. If you're a small builder and you're wanting to grow, the best thing I can suggest to do is go take a tour of a guitar factory.
yeah,
Right. And the nice thing is if you're an intelligent person, you can see what you can get out of it, and like what you can retain and what you can forget. Right. You don't have to do everything like a factory does. Right. If you want to do, if you want to do, binding the way a factory does, great. But if you don't like the vacuum presses that people use to glue on braces, don't do that. Right. Take what you need and forget the rest.
yeah. Beau, do you want to say anything on summation?
Just a big thank you to Matt for taking the time, and yeah, it was fantastic. And you said you're a coffee snob. I was a luthier snob, and I didn't think I could learn anything from factories. But over the years, I've realized that I've been terribly wrong, because every time I see some sort of factory tour, I think, man, that's a good idea. So
well,
on that.
There's more to guitar building than just building. Like the biggest thing that when I go to a guitar factory these days, I don't look at the guitar building. I'm looking at logistics, right? Like I tour guitar factories, and I'm walking around with my camera looking at what do their build sheets look like? Where are they storing their parts? How are they storing their parts? Where is the body storage? What does that look like? Right? It's because that's the thing that holds up a maker. You know how to build a guitar. You want to build 10 guitars, build 10 guitars. You want to build 100 guitars, build 100. But your problem isn't going to be your skill, it's going to be your logistics. Right? Where do you store your parts? What does that look like? Right? How do you ensure that you have everything? That's the thing that you need to take from larger guitar factories, not the guitar making per se. Maybe, yeah, sure, it might be a little bit, but it's the logistics.
That's so true. Bottlenecks, throughput. I remember all that stuff. Everybody, yeah. Can you unmute and tell both Matt and Beau thank you for taking the time. And
Matt, thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Beau.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, guys.
I have no idea how many people were listening to this. So I assume it was just the two of you.
Oh no, this is the whole thing. We recorded it too, so I'm gonna go back and look at your radius sanding machines again.